Well, welcome everyone. Really excited to present to you today our webinar on designing for Dementia-Home edition. My name is Dean Henderson. I am the Director of Client Experience, Education and Innovation at the Dementia Society. I'm joined here by two dementia experts, Claudine and Emily, who are occupational therapy students. And they'll be leading you through this presentation. This is really what I see as the first of a series of presentations on designing for dementia. It is really fascinating for me, and really there's such a big impact that we can make when we look at the environment. So today, I hope that you walk away from this webinar with a little bit of some nuggets that you can implement quickly, cheaply, in order to support an inclusive environment for the person with dementia that you're supporting. You'll learn that there is no one size fits all in designing an environment for people living with dementia. It's really about taking a holistic approach and looking at how we maximize independence, autonomy, and well-being in order to ensure that the person's psychosocial and physical needs are met. So this is the idea of this webinar in the future series, is that we're not going to give you tips on redesigning and rebuilding your house, but some small modifications that you can make maybe right after this webinar or in the very near future. So hope you enjoy this and you take some practical tips out of this webinar. And please feel free to ask questions. We hope that we could have a discussion at the end of this and provide some support. So with that, for those of you who are not aware, we can go to the next slide. For those of you who are not aware, the Dementia Society is a nonprofit that does support people living with dementia, caregivers, families. We've been supporting Ottawa and Renfrew County since 1980, and we are your local resource for community-based dementia support. Okay, next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is dementia, and I'm just going to be very brief here because Emily is going to take you through this in a little bit more detail, but dementia is an umbrella term. It's an overarching term for a series of conditions that we are probably familiar with: Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, frontal temporal dementia. There are many different types of dementia under that umbrella term. Dementia is really not part of typical aging. So just because you're over 80 doesn't mean that you're going to have dementia. And the typical symptoms that you generally see with dementia are memory loss, cognitive changes in cognitive ability, behavior, but it really becomes dementia when it affects your ability to engage in activities of daily living. And what we'll break down here a little bit more is that when a person's impairment affects their ability to engage in activities of daily living, well, then we can do some modifications to maybe the activity itself or the environment. And in this webinar, we're going to talk about modifications to the environment.
Thank you, Dean, for that introduction. My name is Emily, and as Dean mentioned, I'm a student occupational therapist from the University of Ottawa, working at the Dementia Society. And so I'm going to walk you through some of the impairments that we commonly see with dementia and the progression of dementia. It's important to understand these in order to understand how we can intervene and what sort of things that we can do to support the person living at home for longer. So the first two that I'm going to talk about is sight and hearing. So these two are the two main senses that we use to process our environment. And so whenever we have impairments to these two, you can understand how it can be difficult to interact with your environment. So when it comes to sight, there can be an impairment with vision due to the yellowing of the lens, and there can be also difficulties with color perception. So some colors on the spectrum are more difficult for people with dementia to perceive. So on one end of the spectrum, we have the blue colors, which are more difficult to perceive as dementia progresses. And on the other end, the opposite end of the spectrum, we have those red and orange colors, which are retained for longer. And that's why we will use red colors as wayfinders for people with dementia. We can often see blurred vision as well as increased sensitivity to glare. When it comes to visual perception changes, we're talking about misperceptions and misidentifications. I'll give you a few examples. The person may think they have seen a spider in the corner of the room, but when they look again, they realize it was a shadow or a mark on the wall. The person with dementia may also see a dark colored floor mat or doormat and perceive it as a deep black hole. This can be nerve-wracking for them, and so they may avoid it completely. Misperceptions and misidentifications can also lead a person with dementia to make errors in how they use an object. For example, a person with dementia checking out at the grocery store may use their bus pass try to use it as a payment card. When it comes to hearing, noise disturbances can cause distress, and it can make it difficult to follow conversations in a noisy environment. I'll give you an example to put yourself in the person with dementia's shoes. I personally like to listen to loud music whenever I'm driving, but when I'm in an unfamiliar environment and I'm looking for that street number on the house or the building, I turn down the music as if it would help me see better. And the reason for that is that our brain is trying to process too much information at once and can make it more challenging. So when you're having a conversation with a person with dementia, think about how the background noise can be distracting for them and can make it harder for them to follow the conversation. Now I'm going to talk about how dementia can affect the circadian rhythm. Here we're talking about sleep disturbances and possibly confusion of night and day. So with the progression of dementia, oftentimes we'll see increased wakefulness at night, as well as sleeping more often during the day. And this can lead to the progression of loss of day-night variation, where the person spends most of the evening when they should be sleeping awake and spend most of the day sleeping. Some other changes that we can see is the duration of the rapid eye or REM sleep is decreased in dementia, as well as the slow wave sleep. And this is really important to note because memory consolidation happens during that slow wave sleep. So that's whenever we process things that have happened during the day and store them in our memory. So as you can see, difficulty with sleep or sleep disturbances can impact the memory. That leads me to my next point, which is impaired memory with dementia, and that's often one of the first things that people noticed in their loved ones. There are two main ways that memory is affected by dementia, and that's the retrieval of information as well as the encoding of information. So it can take a person living with dementia longer to retrieve information from their memory, and it can also be more difficult for them to encode new information or new memories. Memory loss can affect everyone differently, but here are some common examples that people with dementia experience. Forgetting recent conversation or events, struggling to find the right words in a conversation, forgetting names of people or objects, losing or misplacing items such as their keys or glasses, getting lost in familiar surroundings, forgetting how to carry out a familiar task such as making a cup of tea, forgetting appointments or anniversaries, not being able to track medications or whether or not it has been taken, and struggling to recognize faces of people they know well. Another thing that's associated with memory and dementia is what we call time shifting. So time shifting is when the person with dementia believes that they're living at an earlier time in their life. I'll give you an example. So the person with dementia may not recognize their adult daughter that's coming to visit them because they expect her to look much younger. They believe that she's still 15 years old. They may also believe that the people who have died are still alive, which is why people with advanced dementia may be asking for their parents, even though they're in advanced age themselves. They may also not recognize themselves when they look in the mirror because they expect to see a much younger version of themselves. As you can imagine, not recognizing who you see in the mirror can be pretty traumatizing and distressing for the person with dementia. Next, we'll talk briefly about impaired learning and how the learning process is impacted by the progression of dementia. So learning is very closely linked to memory, which we just spoke about. And so the inability to store new information makes it difficult to learn new tasks. For example, how to operate the new microwave that was installed at the house. The impaired learning can also make it difficult to comprehend directions or instructions that are given. Impaired reasoning and judgment are also features seen with the progression of dementia. So the person living with dementia may not be able to reason or explain their actions and behavior. For example, withdrawing large amounts of money from their bank without having a reason or explanation for why they did it. The loss of judgment can become a big safety concern. For example, crossing the street before checking both ways. The loss of judgment is one of the reasons driver's licenses are taken away after assessments. Now we're going to talk about how dementia can impact the musculoskeletal system. Oftentimes, a person with dementia may experience loss of balance or coordination. We might notice that their feet shuffle or drag when they walk. They might have weaker muscles and experience fatigue, and they may have trouble in later stages controlling their bladder or bowels. Weakness in muscle can make them prone to falls. Now I'll speak briefly to the visuospatial challenges that a person with dementia can experience. So they may have difficulty judging distances, and they may have changes in the vision field, which we spoke about briefly. So in mid stages of dementia, people tend to lose their peripheral vision. So imagine you have blinders on your eyes, sort of like horses do, and all you see is what's in front of them. When we talk about later stages of dementia, the vision field becomes like binoculars. So imagine that you're seeing through just these round circles. A person with dementia may also have difficulty with depth perception, which means that it can be difficult to judge the stairs. So they might not lift their foot high enough to make that step. The person with dementia may also have decreased spatial awareness, which means that they don't know where their body parts are in relation to the space around them. So this may cause them to bump into furniture or knock things over without realizing it. That summarizes the impairments that we commonly see with dementia. Now I'm going to talk about dementia and the built environment. So as Dean mentioned, all three of the presenters here were all in the occupational therapy field. And so this is one of the models that we frequently use to assess and plan our interventions. And so when we look at how we can help a person, we want to consider the skills and the abilities that the person has, the occupation and the task that they're trying to do, as well as any barriers or facilitators in the environment. Essentially, we're trying to find that perfect match between all three so that we have optimal performance and participation. During this presentation, we're going to talk and focus on the environment and how we can change that environment to better support the person's current abilities. I'll pass the mic over to Claudine, who's going to talk about design principles.
Hi, everyone. My name is Claudine, and I'm also a student in occupational therapy, working at the Dementia Society as a dementia care coach. So let's start by talking about some design principles. So the research shows that there are 6 principles when designing for dementia, and you can apply all of these principles to your own home. So the first one is familiar. So people living with dementia relate to their environment through familiar places, objects, or landmarks. The second one is distinctive. So this is important so people with dementia feel like they belong in their own home. Then there's navigable. This is to help people with dementia move freely and independently around their homes and their neighborhood. Then there's inclusive. So the design must respond to the needs of people with dementia. Comfortable and stimulating. The environment should reduce stress and disorientation and encourage participation, conversation, and activity. The last one is safe. So the safety of people with dementia in both the home environment and the external spaces they use is obviously critical design requirements. So you can switch the slide, Emily. All right, so now we're going to talk about some design interventions. Firstly, to kind of promote and facilitate toileting. So if you notice that some of the challenges, if one of the challenges can be locating the bathroom or the toilet, a few things that you can do is, first of all, paint the bathroom door, use some visual cues. So for example, having a red light at the restroom door, put a sign on the bathroom door as well can work, leaving the door open to enhance visibility, or even installing a colored toilet seat, as you can see on the slides here. You can also use high contrast. So highlight key features, edges, and hazards, and make sure there's good lighting. You can also move the bedroom closer to the bathroom. If another challenge is that the person has difficulty reaching the toilet on time, a few things you can do for that is having a portable commode near the bed, using a urinal, bedpan, or consider a toileting routine. And if the person is maybe unsure of what to do or how to toilet, a few things you can do about that is firstly remove the locks and remove distractions. So for example, removing any resembling toilet bowls items such as waste baskets, hampers, and any other items that could look like that. Now we can talk about bathing and personal care. So if you notice that the person with dementia experiences confusion when bathing, a few strategies you can use is label tap hot and cold. Just store away excess items. So make sure there's not too much around. And also use a child-proof lock on the medicine cabinet. So you make sure that the person with dementia just don't take extra medication or is not getting confused with that. One thing you can do when the person has trouble getting around in the bathroom, it can appear very simple, but it can be very useful. So just removing clutter has shown to be very helpful. And then if you notice that the challenge is with vision, then one thing you can do is remove glare by installing a sheet rubber. You can see a picture of it in the slide here if you don't know what that is. So that can reduce glare. And why is it so important to reduce glare? It's because it can make people with dementia very uncomfortable. So reducing glare not only contributes to comfort, but it also helps to minimize falls and maximize attention span. One other thing to do, and I honestly didn't know that not too long ago, is cover and remove mirrors. And why would we do that? It's because sometimes people with dementia don't understand that they're seeing a reflected image of themselves. So they might think that a stranger has suddenly appeared near them, and then it creates a fear of mirrors. And this could be a reason why people with dementia refuse to bathe, or they become simply just agitated in the bathroom. So here's just a slide with a few examples of what we just talked about. So again, hiding mirrors, using a sign on the bathroom, having a colored toilet seat, and colored door handle. So just highlighting key features. Then we can discuss about some things you can do to just facilitate sleeping. So if you notice that the person with dementia is experiencing falls, or you notice safety issues in the bedroom. So a few things you can do about that is lower the bed if possible, put the mattress on the floor, move the bed against the wall. Yeah, all of that just reduces fall risks. And having a fall prevention bed alarm and motion sensor lights. Some other generalized strategies that are working pretty well also is just avoiding stimulating colors, images, and sounds in the bedroom. So that means that the bedroom shouldn't contain any bright colors, patterns, or bright lights, as these may stimulate hallucination in people with dementia who suffers from them. Also, a quiet, dark bedroom helps promote sleep. So any bright blinking lights from digital clocks, TVs, computers, and other electronics can sometimes confuse and disrupt sleep among people with dementia. So you can try and reduce those light sources as much as possible. Then just a few strategies about what you can do to facilitate homemaking activities. So if the person with dementia has difficulty remembering where things are in the kitchen, and that's something that really comes up fairly often, a few things you can do is just place pictures, signs, and labels on door, closets, cabinets, and drawers, and also maybe installing transparent shelving and doors. So sometimes people with dementia tend to just ask where things go. So maybe that could be something that could help. If you notice that there are some challenges with participating and engaging in cooking activities, one thing you can do is just provide a place for the person with dementia to sit. So the person can just carry out activities and observe others. And also earlier, Emily talked about how sometimes background noises can be distracting. So you can try and reduce those distractions as much as possible. That could be also something that can be very helpful. And if you have any safety concerns in the kitchen, a few things you can do is just store away appliances that can no longer be operated safely. And then you can decrease use and store away dangerous items and sharp objects. Now a few things about just eating and drinking. So if you see that the person with dementia has difficulty eating, sometimes the person will get distracted or is unsure of where the plate is on the table. What you can do about that is just remove everything that's unnecessary. So any cutlery items that don't need to be there, you can just remove them from the table. You can avoid placemats, tablecloth, dishes with confusing patterns. And you can lay the table in contrasting colors, as you can see on one of our pictures here. And it can happen sometimes that, people with dementia has difficulty holding utensils because of, weakness or tremors or any things like that. So what you can do for that is simply use some assistive devices to promote eating. So either like a rubber spoon or weighted spoon that can sometimes reduce the tremors, that could help the person with dementia keep being independent with eating, and that could just be something helpful for you as well.
Okay, and I'll take over here for a moment to talk about design interventions when we talk about deficits and challenges with perception, orientation, and memory. So if you notice challenges associated with orientation, like difficulty with time and space, some of the things you can do to support the person with dementia would be to avoid two-dimensional patterns on the floor, any large, bold geometric patterns in carpet. I'll show you an example on the next slide here. So the one in the middle and the one on the right of the screen, these can be overwhelming for a person with dementia. It can look like moving objects. And as I mentioned earlier, on the left-hand side, you see the black mat, which can be perceived as a large black hole. Some other things that we can do to support the challenges with orientation is to avoid any patterns on wallpapers, such as the one in the picture here on the right. We can label doors with extra large letters or pictures. And then we can put name and photo of the person on their room or on their bedroom door so that they know it's theirs. If you notice challenges with vision, such as decreased vision or awareness of their surroundings, some of the things you can do is to simplify the environment and keep familiar objects in the same place. We also want to have dark doorknobs on light doors so that they're distinguishable. And as I mentioned before, when it came to the bathroom, is to remove or cover any mirrors or shiny surfaces. If you notice challenges with difficulty remembering appointments and or family members, things you can do is to display family pictures in the environment or provide a handheld photo album with labels that describe the people or the memories that it involves in the photo. We can also make lists of daily activities or keep notes close by.
So back to me. Thank you, Emily and Claudine. I'll close this off here, and then we can open it up for discussion if anyone has any questions. But really, what we're trying to share is that a person's home, and I think everyone understands this. A person's home and their possessions represent a lifetime of accomplishments and contribute to quality of life as we age. A home can also allow for people, and does allow for people, to express for expression and maintenance of our personal identity and our lifestyle choices. And our home is a significant, provides significant meaning. As we age, being in a familiar space is also have been found to help us enable and maintain our capabilities and independence. And this is especially important as we learn today how dementia affects our ability to maintain our independence. So as the vast majority of people living with dementia wish to remain at home, and actually do. Around 61% of people living with dementia across Canada right now do live in the community. And so what we're trying to suggest here is that there are opportunities to make some minor adjustments to the environment to enable people to age in place longer. And there is, as we've heard, there is no one size fits all for designing an environment for people living with dementia. It is person dependent. But if you consider some of those 6 design principles, then you're on the right track. And as I'd mentioned, this will be the start of probably a few webinars on this topic of designing for dementia. So the key takeaways that we hope that you've come away with here is that the environment does play a significant role in enabling aging in place. There are everyone's experience with dementia is different, and but there are some typical impairments that people do display, and we can set up the environment for success. And the last takeaway is a little bit of homework that I'm assigning for everyone participating in this webinar, is to complete your own audit in your environment that the person living with dementia that you're supporting. Maybe it's in your own home right now, or that it is a family member's home. So look at some of the tips that Emily and Claudine shared. Look at the doorways. Are the wall colors the same as the doorways? And maybe it's difficult to tell where the entrance to the bathroom is. Maybe complete a noise audit. When you're having a conversation, is the TV on? Is the radio on? Maybe that is why your family member is engaging less in the conversation, because there's lots of distractions. Look at the lighting, and look at the lighting throughout the day. Maybe when the sun starts to set, you can see some shadows that maybe when you put yourselves in the person with living with dementia's shoes, that coat hanger could look like a person. And that makes sense why they have said that someone keeps visiting them every evening. Look at the wayfinding. Wayfinding means, are you able to easily find your way around the house? Or could you remove some clutter? Or just moving the bedroom across from the bathroom may be a simple solution to help with wayfinding towards the bathroom. And finally, look at flooring. Are there some rugs that you can remove that may be distracting or falls hazard? Or is there a lot of glare in the flooring? So these are just some of the tips. Again, not a complete audit, but just something to get you started. And if you do an audit and you have more questions, I would highly encourage you to reach out, and we'd be happy to support and have a further discussion and to support this. You engaging in some design principles. We're not going to start our own HGTV channel just yet, but there may be a webinar or two in the future about how you can further engage in some design principles. So with that, we'll bring it to a close, and happy to engage in any conversations here and questions.